record. Perfect. So this is one of our letter to the editor workshops we're really excited about. Medical Students for a Sustainable Future recently had an op-ed workshop, which Elise will talk a little bit more about. And I'm going to introduce Elise in a minute, who will be talking about our letter to the editor and op-ed campaign, which will last about a month and a half. But before we do so, just really happy to have you here. And today you'll have a chance to actually practice writing an op-ed that we will encourage you to submit and we'll talk more about. And if you have any questions, this is really an interactive session. So we encourage you to ask sessions throughout. And we have Jake here, who's a wonderful resource. But I'm going to start by introducing Elise. Elise is one of our ambassadors, and she's also the advocacy chair with Medical Students for a Sustainable Future. And she's going to be telling you a little bit more about our campaign that I briefly mentioned in my email earlier. And everyone is welcome. It's for young and emerging health professionals, not just our next generation ambassadors. So Elise, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can tell us all about the campaign.
All right, so as Becca said, my name is Elise Brannon. I am one of the advocacy chairs for Medical Students for a Sustainable Future. And together with Physicians for Social Responsibility, we have planned this advocacy through writing campaign. Basically, what we're hoping to do is encourage students and young health professionals to write op-eds, letters to the editor, any sort of advocacy through writing. And write them on various environmental topics, and then hopefully publish them either in a local newspaper or something like that, or have us as Medical Students for a Sustainable Future and PSR highlight your stories. So the op-ed and letter to the editor writing campaign is going to technically start on Monday, on August 8th, after these sessions, and it's co-run by us, MS4SF, and PSR's Next Gen Ambassador Program for Young and Emerging Health Professionals. And it's an opportunity for you to strengthen your writing and advocacy skills together. You can choose to write a letter to the editor, an op-ed, both. We are hoping that your writing will be on a topic related to climate and health or environmental justice, something like that. We will have a list made available as well if you're not really sure where to start, to give you some inspiration on topics that you can write on. And we're going to discuss one tonight as well. We also have recordings for the op-ed workshop that we hosted recently, and now you're at the letter to the editor training, but I think recordings for these will also be made available for those who are not able to join. Basically, if you're interested, let us know, and we will be sending out tips, tricks, things like that for writing throughout the campaign on social media, through weekly emails. And we're also going to send out weekly news articles that you can base your letter to the editors off of, and then kind of hope that that will inspire you to also look through your local news and see if there's anything that's relevant on a more local scale. Some important dates to think about. First, the campaign technically begins on Monday, on August 8th. We will also be offering editing. So if anyone would like someone else to take a look at their piece before they submit it for publishing, we as MS4SF and PSR will be offering some extra sets of eyes for you. And the deadline for submitting your LTEs and op-eds for editing will be Friday, September 9th. And then finally, the deadline for submitting your final letter to the editors and op-eds will be the following week, Friday, September 16th. We're hoping to have a bunch of op-eds and LTEs submitted by September 17th, which is World Cleanup Day. So if you don't have any plans, maybe consider doing an advocacy writing situation. And then also you can choose to publish your LTEs or op-eds on your own through local newspapers, through local news sources, through your institutions, things like that. Or if you don't want to deal with all of the publication things, then you can send them to us and we will highlight them on our social medias, on our websites and things like that. If you have any questions, you can let me or Becca know. We will also be sending out lots of resources, or at least making them available for you. So yeah, hopefully you will find it in your hearts to use your voice to advocate for the environment through written word. And this is a great start with the letter to the editor workshop. Becca, did I miss anything?
No, that was absolutely wonderful. And for those who came in late, we'll also have this in writing because I know that was a lot of detail. The other thing to note is you can choose to publish it in a newspaper and try for that if you'd like. But whether or not, we will still be featuring your work through social media, newsletters, the PSR Monitor, websites, etc. But you can also tell us, let's say you just want practice, you can also just submit it for us to edit. So there are a range of different possibilities with this campaign. We do want you to really be putting your voice out there because your voice is important, especially as young and emerging health professionals. But at the same time, we recognize that people are at different stages in their advocacy skill set. So we want to make it accessible to all. I think that's it. Okay, so I'm gonna now hand it over, thanks again, Elise, to Jake Assael. He is our policy coordinator for the Environment and Health Program at our PSR National Office. He also oversees our other ambassador program. We call it our Classic Ambassador Program. And he has a lot of experience with different advocacy, particularly policy oriented, and also with writing letters to the editors. And he helps our existing ambassadors write letters to the editors. So he's a wonderful resource. I'm going to turn it over to him and I will begin sharing the slides. Sound good, Jake?
Yeah, that works, Becca. So you're going to share them? Oh, you're on mute now.
Oh, it's up to you. Do you prefer actually?
Yeah, no, you can share them and I can just say next slide. That works for me.
Awesome. All right.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be on this call. My name is Jake Assael. I'm the policy coordinator with the Physicians for Social Responsibility, as Becca was saying. And I do work with our Climate Ambassador program, and I've sent several proposed LTE invites to them, and I've helped draft several. So although I am not the communications director who was originally supposed to give this presentation, I have some experience and I'm very excited to share this presentation with all of you. So we can go to the next slide. So what is a letter to the editor? I know a lot of us are off camera, but has anyone written one in the past or have an idea of what they are already? Feel free to chime in. If not, I can go ahead.
Hi, sorry, my camera's off because I'm currently moving from one place to the other. I just got out of work, but I wrote an LT a couple weeks back, or a couple months back, actually, just about the American Lung Association released a report, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and our city did really poorly in terms of particulate matter in the air. So I worked with like a local organization to write an LTE about that, and it got published.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you want to share a little bit more of what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, it was, I mean, I would say all in all, it was pretty positive. So I worked with a couple other people to write the letter. It was pretty brief, as it's supposed to be. And then I submitted it, and then I didn't hear back anything until it had been published online. And then from there, I got like a couple letters in the mail from people, just letters of encouragement from people in the community who read it.
So that is a great overview of some of the benefits of writing LTEs. They're very short. You can get some recognition and you can help your community learn about something that's important in your life or important in your career that you think should be more known about in the local community. And in that case, an ALA report, and they do an incredible job. So to follow up on what Mitch was saying, an LTE at its basis is just a written response to what an article in your local paper, regional paper, or even sometimes national media. And they're very brief. As you can see, it's 150 to 300 words. And really, I mean, 150 words is plenty for an LTE. These things don't need to be heavily detail oriented. They just need to promote promote the article that was originally in the paper, and then B, talk about the issue that you think is vital and give your perspective on it. So we can go to the next slide, Becca. When should you write an LTE? Well, in Mitch's case, it was when this ALA report came out and there was important information in there that he wanted to share with his community. It can be if there is a an issue that you don't think was well covered, maybe in an article, and you want to give your own perspective on it. It can be, if you're really passionate about something, and sometimes there doesn't need to be an article already written in the paper. You can just submit an LTE anyway, because maybe they've written about it in the past and they're open to publishing your LTE anyway. And it's important when you write an LTE, when you've got up the passion, the motivation, the article that you want to respond to is in your local paper, that you're succinct. I mean, it goes with it being 150 to 300 words. So you want to boil down all of those thoughts in your head, all those data points that you've might have been researching, and really boil down to the most pressing points that you want to make. Because the people reading your LTEs are not going to be experts in this field. They're not going to be people in your career community. They're going to be people in your community, the people that you see at the grocery store, maybe people that you see at the mall, people at the movie theater. I mean, these are the people that are going to be reading your LTE. They're just people, and they want to be educated, and they think that when someone submits an LTE, that person is usually an expert in that field, and they feel the need to promote this issue. And I love this last point. You write an LTE when you care, you have a point of view, and you can write well. And you know what? If you don't write well, I mean, you can always bring in people to help out. So don't let that stop you. Next slide. So I believe that you guys had a training session on an op-ed on op-eds already. Is that correct, Becca?
Yes, but I know that a lot of people here weren't able to attend, and that's okay. So we just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Yes. So op-eds are traditionally more lengthy, more detail oriented, and there's a lot more room for your opinion. Rather in an LTE, although it is your perspective, there's less room for tirades and for your internal dialogue to be expanded on. When you're writing an LTE, you're just thinking, what are the highlights? What are the headlines that you want in the paper? Op-ed, you're like, okay, here's my headline, here's my analysis. Why is this important? It's much more thorough, and because of it, they're typically more detail oriented. It's usually reserved for people that are, highly expert in the fields. Not to say that those same people don't write LTEs. I guess it just matters how quickly you want to convey your point. Yeah, I think that covers that. Next slide. Writing tips and tricks. So yeah, I like this first bullet of immediately reference the article and cite headline and date. Maybe the date is less important, but when you're writing, I mean, when you want this newspaper or whatever, regional or like online news source maybe to publish your LTE, it always helps when you promote their piece. I mean, because that will lead from your LTE back to their piece, and then they can sell these people more ads or whatever they're doing. So I mean that's always helpful. And I like this. I think for an LTE, it's also important to get right to the point. I think I've said this in 50 different ways, but like get right to it. Like something that really is compelling, something that really brings in the reader to the issue that you're talking about. And make sure when you are starting off this article that you're keeping it to one issue, that you're not like opening up Pandora's box of like 6 different things that you want to cover in this 300 word LTE. No, you just pick your issue, stick to it, make it compelling. Yeah, keep it quick and concise for sure. All right, next slide. How to get your LTE published. Yeah, a lot of this already covered. So most important points should be stated in the first paragraph. And sometimes what I like to do if I'm drafting an LT is make the first paragraph only one sentence, and then just so it's more isolated, and then people focus on it more, because that's gonna be like your, all right, this is what I have to say point. And then the second paragraph, that's when you start kind of expanding a little bit on why it's important, why it matters to your community, why it matters maybe more nationally. And yeah, I mean, that could be a great place for how it relates directly to your state, region, or whatever the community that you're addressing. And obviously, if you want to get an LTE published, make sure that you read the online news source or the newspaper's submission guidelines. The quickest way to not get published is to not read their instructions. And there's going to be, although we said the first slide, it's 150 to 350 word limit. Every newspaper is different. That's probably just an average. But I think usually if you keep it within that 200 to 300 word range, you would be good. But again, the instructions are usually published online. And always try again. I mean, these LTs are so short. I mean, you could think of getting rejected as a first draft. Oh, this first cut. Let me try again. It's 300 words. I could rewrite this in a second. So always don't be discouraged if you don't get published the first time. Sometimes these newspapers get a ton of LTE proposals, so never be discouraged.
Oh, and I just wanted to add that
Yeah.
one thing with like tying it back to your own community, kind of like Mitch was saying, is really important when you have your own experience, because people will resonate with it. Or if you have statistics or like a story from your family or yourself or your friends, let's say you have asthma and you want to write about it, for example. That's the first thing that came to mind. Great
point, Becca. So I think Becca will be sharing these slides out. Is that correct? So PSR has a great, do you want to click the link maybe quickly, just so that they could see it? Yeah, so PSR has pretty much everything that you just read in this presentation on our website. So if you ever, if you want to consult the slides when you're writing these in future, or if you're like, oh, I can't find the slides, you can just go on our website, and we have a 3-page guidance on writing a good LTE. So there's always gonna be resources out there. So maybe if you're not even paying attention on this presentation, don't feel like you've just lost your chance to learn how to write an LTE. Plenty of resources. They're very short, concise, very easy to write. It's mainly just about having the passion and the point of view to want to write something. All right.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add, I mean, I'll be sending out all these links. But if you're like concerned about the structure, I would say just start writing, and then you can always send it to us. And Barb, who was unable to make it because of a family emergency, but I'm pretty sure wrote this guide. She's our director of environment and health, and she'd be also happy to look at it and provide structure. And you can also Google structure of a letter to the editor if you're not sure. But I would focus on just getting down the main points and keeping it succinct. And then if you need help with the structure, that's something that we could always help with at the end. All right, I'm going to stop the share. So go back to the, we should just go back to this. Perfect.
Okay, so here's an example written by one of our, as Becca put them, classic climate ambassadors. I think that's still being workshopped. I haven't heard classic yet, but I like it. And his name is Alan Lockwood. He is from Ohio. And this letter to the editor was written in the wake of EPA's methane rule that they released in late January. And you can, if you want, you can click on the link. And it's only 196 words. In my opinion, maybe a little too detail oriented. I mean, it's great that he had all these stats, but it doesn't need to be that detailed. Like, you don't need to overwhelm your readers with stats. I think 1 or 2 are great. But it's unnecessary. You want to just, unless you think it's really pivotal to the issue that you're writing about, that it be loaded up with statistics, that's fine. But usually people's minds gloss over at numbers, and this is a short piece, so you really want to keep their, you want to get their attention fast and get your point across succinctly. But I do like that he was only 196 words, which is on the short end for an already short piece of writing. And then if you go to his last paragraph, I think his last paragraph really summarizes the importance of his piece. And when I read it, I was like, yeah, that caught me. Then now you have my attention. Now I want to learn more. So I mean, I think those are the three things to take away. It doesn't need to be this detail oriented. Brevity is king, and end with a bang. All right, I think we're good with this.
And then just like the first, as you mentioned, how like the first sentence is its own paragraph kind of.
Yeah.
So,
And he also doesn't cite the article. At least maybe it's in one of these links, but he doesn't mention it. But maybe if you link the original article, that could be good enough. And I'm sure the editor would appreciate that. Okay, now we're on to you guys. So before I hand this back to Becca to start this LTE practice, I just want to go over the article that we're going to have you guys practice on. So it's an article in Forbes about the recent Inflation Reduction Act that was agreed upon between Senator Joe Manchin and the rest of the Democratic caucus to move forward not only healthcare, drugs, and tax provisions, but also a significant chunk of climate change investments, which had been a big hangup since early last year. And it did not seem like this was ever going to happen. And then all of a sudden, Joe Manchin decided he wanted to put his cowboy hat on and play climate hero. I don't really get it, but amen. So a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act, or at least the climate provisions. It would be the most significant investment by Congress into climate change. It would be $369 billion in total, which is down from the $2 trillion that was originally proposed by Joe Biden in his Build Back Better agreement. But it would still be the largest investment in climate change in congressional history. There's a lot of money for climate justice, environmental justice communities, including low income solar and wind investments. There would be a lot of money for air pollution reduction. There would be a lot of renewable energy deployment from this bill, and it would also increase government revenue from oil and gas leasing, which is actually would be expanded through this. But this bill is not perfect, and anyone that says this bill is perfect is lying. Although it would help the U.S. Stay in line with the Paris Agreement and the goal of reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius above industrial levels, and help us avoid catastrophic warming. But there are some investments in carbon capture and storage, hydrogen with methane blending, nuclear power, and like I said, fossil fuel leasing. So it's not perfect, and I think that just comes with the territory of negotiating with Senator Joe Manchin. But again, the largest investment in climate action in congressional history, and it will help the U.S. meet the goals put out by President Biden at the beginning of his administration. So it is a big climate win, if not perfect. And another thing that should be stated is, and maybe this isn't for the LT, but there's still more that needs to be done. Absolutely. This is a step in the right direction, but it's not the silver bullet that we need. So I think that's good for background. I will open it up for questions before maybe handing it back to Becca. So questions on either the Inflation Reduction Act or everything that we just went over in the LTE presentation.
You can also post in the chat if you feel more comfortable. And please ask questions. We love questions.
I have a question, and maybe this is a bit off base a little bit, but I'm wondering how you feel about writing LTEs, not as an individual, but like with a group of people. Do you think it's more powerful to have like 3 or 4 people signing on to a letter to the editor, or like a small group, like a student group or something signing on? Or do you think it doesn't really matter? Our voice as like students and young health professionals is strong enough?
That's a good question. So I haven't been a part of an LT that had more than one name on the byline, even if multiple people helped out. And I think it depends on how influential the group is in that community, and how well known the people writing the LT are. I mean, because if you get to the end of an LT and you see 5 names, I mean, that might not mean anything to you. But if you see like a group name that you've been involved with, or of through community experience, or is well known nationally, that could be eye-catching. Also, if in your author description, like you come across as someone well versed in this issue, and someone that maybe like is very tied into the community, that could also have a positive influence on the readers. But it is a good question, and not one that I have a ton of experience with. So I hope my answer was okay.
Yeah, totally fine. I was just curious if you had any thoughts one way or the other.
I was also
Yeah.
gonna say, you kind of see it sometimes in petitions that they kind of use some like a format that's similar to the letter to the editor, and have like, you see that sometimes. But I see it more commonly as a single authorship. But you can totally submit, like there's no, I mean, you should check the newspaper that you're submitting to, but most papers aren't going to care if you use Physicians for Social Responsibility or Medical Students for Sustainable Future versus yourself. Although I think like the specificity is also important. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I will say for the one I did, because we worked on it in an organization, but we decided that because it was for an entire, like the organization was within the entire state of Ohio. We decided, since I lived in Cincinnati, that I would be the name for it. But then after my name, I put the organization's name. So that way it kind of was both, even though I worked on it with like 4 or 5 other people.
Yeah, and I'll say in the example I showed you guys, Dr. Alan Lockwood did put that he was like a member of the Physicians for Social Responsibility. So I mean, there's like exactly what Mitch said, like sometimes you don't need many people signing on, but like if there's a mention of your organization, that's enough. Any other questions? I apologize for not breaking up the presentation a little more with questions interjected. I kind of just got on a roll and couldn't stop talking.
Hi, I'm not sure if y'all can hear me. You can? Okay. I was just wondering regarding the time frame. I know you said that, the earlier that we can respond to an article, the better. But what would you suggest if something like a couple of days isn't feasible? Because sometimes, just because I'm a little late to things, like I might read an article that was published, let's say like in February of this year, and I would want to respond, but I don't know if it's like too late. So it was like 6 months. Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's going to have to depend on the editor. Yes, I think you should get them in as soon as possible, and I think that's your best shot of getting them published. But I mean, if the LT is compelling enough, and if it's about an issue that's still salient in people's attention, and you cite the article and give it a lot of airtime, I think a few months won't kill you. And I think you still have a reasonable shot. I can't say for sure, and it's gonna be such a case by case basis. I guarantee you can find a few stories where someone sent an LT like a year later. But yeah, earlier the better. And it would also depend on the kind of news source that you're reaching out to. Like if it's the New York Times, definitely not. You have to get that in immediately. You're gonna be in competition with like 100 other LTs. If it's your local paper and maybe they don't get a ton of LT interest, I don't know. I don't see why they would say no.
What about if it's like a scientific journal?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. But you know, these things are so short. It's just like, why not? Just even if he doesn't go through, like just write it anyway. I mean, 150 to 300 words. If you're that passionate about it, yeah, just write it, submit it. Who cares?
Okay, thank you.
I also was gonna say, I mean, you could probably, the thing that I could think of most readily that you could probably reply to after the fact would be like, I'm thinking of like with heat waves or fire season in the summer. Let's say somebody wrote about a fire last year, and then you wanted to follow up at being like, it's even worse this year, or some type of like weather related thing. I can think about, or like even recently with some of the heat waves in Europe, demonstrating that things have gotten even worse. I'm sure that some papers would actually appreciate that. I think it's also more we were trying to highlight the difference between the op-ed and the letter to the editor, and because it's so like you're responding to a topical article, that's kind of where that speed comes in. But I also think it's fine to just practice and try responding, and we're all human too. Like not everyone's going to be just like looking at papers to respond to letters to the editor all the time. Is there any other questions? And we will also, somebody asked me, we will send out this recording and the slides and that guide after, so you don't have to take too many notes. All right. Okay, Jake, I'm gonna talk about the practice session. Does that work? So we have about 24 minutes left. And we want to set aside a chunk for you just to practice writing a little bit. And then we'll come back together at the end and do a little bit of Q&A and sharing about how the experience went. You have to hop off, that's okay. So the idea is we just chose one different article. If you search right now, you will probably see so many different articles about the Inflation Reduction Act. Some will be also talking more about the climate impacts of the bill. Some will be talking a little bit more about healthcare or inflation reduction, all of those. And you're going to see a lot of different opinions about it, like just editorials about it. So this is just one article. It's relatively short. So the idea is just read through it, and then you're going to form whatever opinion you have, use 1 to 2 points, and just go for it. Just kind of get some words on the page, and then you can share it with us, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then the idea is, because this is something that's really topical right now, and we need a lot of voices advocating for what Jake was talking about, like this is a really important bill, and this is a really big step forward in terms of climate change policy and solutions. But there are definitely things that we want to see more of, and that might be missing or not highlighted enough. So I don't want to steer your LTE in any one direction or the other. You can go so many different ways with this. But then afterwards, because this is a national article and it's probably going to be a little bit harder to get published, not saying you shouldn't try national articles if you want. We would find it awesome if you found like a local newspaper that's covering the story. or you could use the Forbes, or you could use another magazine or whatever, and then respond to it and submit a letter to the editor. Or maybe you just want to use this one as practice, and then you can write another one for the campaign. This is also included, so this one can be the one that you want to work on for your campaign. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, there's still like a 2-week period before Congress will actually meet about, please correct me if I'm wrong, you know.
Yeah, so actually it's much more immediate than
Oh, it's
that.
more, I thought it was 2 weeks. Okay, I'm wrong.
Yeah, so the Senate will be voting on it this weekend.
Okay,
That's the plan, and then the House should be voting on it next week at some point.
okay, yeah.
And just to follow up on what Becca was saying, I don't want to steer your LTs either, but I think some good topics to zone in on are the public health benefits that will come with this bill if passed. You know, we've seen a lot of heat waves, so investing in renewable resources and climate change mitigation will help reduce, you know, a lot of the extreme weather events we've seen currently in the future. And then also starting to transition away from fossil fuels by deploying more renewable energy resources, and also investing in environmental justice communities will help those that are more disproportionately affected by climate change adapt and receive some of the economic stimulus from the transition to a clean energy economy. So those are just a couple points that I was just thinking of as Becca was talking. Don't need to steer. I just wanted to put those out.
Mhm. Okay, before we let you guys go for a few minutes, we'll give you like 15 minutes, and then we'll regroup in the last 5 with the questions and closing. So I'm just gonna post the article in the chat, and then also while you're writing, please feel free to just like type questions in the chat, and then Jake and I can help, or anybody really that has written an LTE can just answer them. Because as like another theme I think you've noticed is there's not like one exact way to do it, and it's going to depend a lot on the paper. So I'm gonna post this in the chat. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna stop sharing. All right. So this is the article, and we're just having you respond to this for just making it unified. So you have a few minutes. I know it's like still short, but you might take longer as a writer. So you could even just like organize, this is like the argument you're going to do, 1 or 2 pieces of evidence, and then you can write it later, whatever you want to do with these like 15 minutes. And I'll let you guys know when we have 5 minutes left. Thanks, Megan. Have a good dinner.
Well, one, like,
Sorry, yeah.
oh, no.
I want to have a question if people have questions. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I think, I mean, there's so many different arguments that can be made based on this article. How many opinions would you say like one letter to the editor should, like, because it's short, and so already my mind is kind of going down the like sort of jobs route of like what the labor industry is going to look like, or like what communities are able to acquire jobs and how that training happens, and like on a local scale, like what that expertise looks like. Because I know that's something that's talked a lot about with environmental justice organizations, is just like allowing for appropriate training and stuff like that. So that's like kind of the route I'm going down. And then I'm like also wanting to include like environmental justice, and then like all these other just, I don't know, it's hard to narrow down like one opinion. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions about that.
Yeah, so so you're saying that like just you have a lot of like viewpoints and it's hard to narrow. Yeah, and I think with an LTE, it's okay to discuss like, especially when you're talking about climate change, like this will be maybe your focus is like economy, and then you can like kind of bring in everything that's in there, but like in a concise way. So you wouldn't get as detailed as you would if you just focus on one aspect of it, but like you can be like, yeah, like, this bill will invest in union jobs, and it will bring renewable resources to local communities and create jobs there. And you can kind of go on and list it out that way, and kind of paint with like a very broad brush and few words. And I've seen those before, and they work. You just have to be careful not to A, exceed the word limit, and B, just inundate your readers with too much at once. So I would try to, if you're going to do that route, like maybe pick 2 or 3 points that you want to really narrow down on. But yeah, I mean, you're just working within like a very, 300 words isn't a ton. So you just got to make sure that your main points aren't being lost in everything that you want to cover. It's a balance.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course. Becca, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, I do want to add that the article, it was hard to find one that was short because this is such a big bill that has more than just climate, obviously. So that's why I suggested to just like focus on that, the one about the jobs and the public health benefits. But yeah, as Jake said, I kind of echo maybe like your main argument is that it's going to create more green jobs. And then you can have like 3 different sub arguments within that. Like, honestly, you can think about it like the miniest essay ever. First, like, I mean, I think most of us have been in school or in school where like you have like your opening, your thesis, which is basically like your bam, your hook, and then everything else is just like supporting what you're saying, but it can be like a little different. So you could also argue, for example, that having more clean energy jobs in certain communities is also going to help with environmental justice or whatever, or it can also help with public health in some capacity, but just don't go too far off topic. I don't know if I just literally like repeated everything Jake said, but that's why the op-ed is like one of those things where you go into like a lengthier discussion with the ins and outs, everything. This is really like clear and to the point. And the other thing I would say is that if you have like 3 different ideas, you could write 3 different short op-eds and just try it
LTEs.
out. Yeah, right? Oh wait, I didn't mean op-eds. I meant LTEs. I really did. You knew what I meant. You could write 3 different LTEs and then try that. So, thanks for the question. And Hope, do you have any questions before we close? I don't know if you are working on something.
She just put in the chat that she's good.
Okay, great. Thanks both of you for staying on. And Elise, do you have any questions?
I don't. I wasn't able to write anything just because of timing. So I don't have anything to share, but I don't have any questions. And I think I will take some time this evening to try and write something out.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, it was really nice being on this presentation with everyone and meeting you all.
Yeah, I think we're gonna close just because we'll allow you guys to go work on it if you'd like. And but yeah, it was really wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining. And thanks, Jake and Elise.
Of course.
All right. Good evening.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye.